Good morning, everybody. This lesson is on the concept of making your poetry sound good. So have a listen.
Once upon a time, not long ago, when people wore pajamas and lived life slow, where laws were stern and justice stood, and people were behaving like they ought to good, there lived a little boy who was misled by another little boy, and this is what he said. Me and you tonight, we're gonna make some cash, robbing old folks and making the dash. They did the job, money.
That was off of Rap Tracks 2, which was an album that I bought on cassette tape way back in the, I think that would have been in the late 80s. Rap stands, I don't know if you knew this, rap stands for Real American Poetry. That's where the word comes from. And in its essence, that's what rap really is. It's poetry. Now, all music is kind of poetry, but rap specifically is different because it's not even necessarily meant to be musical in its essence. It's not, you don't sing rap, you speak it. And you don't sing poetry either, you speak it. So what I'm going to be doing is talking to you a little bit about the idea of how to make your poetry sound good, the concept of making words sound beautiful, which is one of the things that an actual legit poet does. They make words sound beautiful. So I'm going to go to the master, to Shakespeare, and you probably recognize this. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. That comes from the famous balcony scene, which is one of the most well-known scenes in all of Shakespeare. And it's well known because of the drama involved. It's actually, it's kind of funny when you look at it. It's creepy. It's a really creepy scene. Romeo is saying this as he's sort of hiding in the trees outside of Juliet's room. But I guess back in the 1500s, not that big of a deal. So it's well known for being dramatic, but it's actually a really good example of rhythm and of Shakespeare's ability to make words sound beautiful. And the acid test for this is the fact that you could also read it like this. But soft what light through yonder window breaks. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already grown sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, are far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. So you can rap iambic pentameter when it's written, effectively. And Shakespeare was a master when it came to that style of poetry. He's got rhythm, just like rap has got rhythm. Shakespeare had rhythm, and I don't get hung up on the whole idea of like iambic pentameter versus trochaic pentameter. To me, the stressing is not as important as just simply counting the number of syllables. Because if you've got the same number of syllables in a line, you will have rhythm. It might not be perfect, but it will be there. If you have varying numbers of syllables in your lines, you will just simply not have rhythm. So another really good example of that is a poem called Lochinvar, which is one that I use in my grade 9 course in the poetry unit we have there. And the reason why I like Lochinvar is because it's got a waltzing rhythm to it. And I remember when I was just starting out teaching at a colleague, he was just starting as well. And he didn't really have an ear for rhythm. And he came to me and he asked me to show him, like, what is the rhythm of this poem? And, I'd actually show him how there was like a waltzing kind of rhythm. So just listening. O young Lochinvar is come out of the west. Through all the wide border his steed was the best. And save his good broadsword, he weapons had none. He rode all unarmed, and he rode all alone. So faithful in love, and so dauntless in war, There never was night like the young Lochinvar. It's got that 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. It's got that rhythm going all the way through it. So rhythm is half the battle when you're writing lyrical poetry. Lyrical being the idea of poetry that almost sings. It's the, if you want to learn a little bit of history, all the way up to the 20th century, poetry, in order to be poetry, really did have to be lyrical. It started to kind of change in the 1800s, like the later 1800s, but even like in the Tennyson years, which were 1850, like almost all the way up to the 20th century, it was all about rhyme and rhythm. And the farther you go back, the more it is. Like Shakespeare, you can't get anything more like strict than the sonnet. And Shakespeare, in his time, the sonnet was like the ultimate form of poetry. And you have to have 14 lines. And each line has to be iambic pentameter. And the rhyme scheme has to be a certain way. Depending on the type of sonnet you're writing, that's prescribed. So you don't have a lot of freedom to express thoughts, but man, it does sound really, really good. So consider this poem by Tennyson, who's, to me, probably the most important poet of the 1800s, or the Victorian era of the 1800s, even though I don't think he's the best, but the most important. This is from a poem called Mariana. So as I'm reading this, I want you to listen for the rhythm and I want you to listen for the rhyme. With blackest moss, the flower pots were thickly crusted, one and all. The rusted nails fell from the knots that held the pier to the gable wall. The broken sheds looked sad and strange. Unlifted was the clinking latch. Weeded and worn the ancient thatch upon the lonely moated grange. She only said, my life is dreary, he cometh not, she said. She said, I am aweary, I were that I were dead. So this poem has got a really good example of rhythm, and a rhythm that changes. So what I'm looking at here is a rhyme scheme that's, we're looking at a quatrain, which is a set of 4 lines. With blackest moss the flower plots were thickly crusted, one and all. The rusted nails fell from the knots that held the pier to the gable wall. So that is on its own a quatrain, and it's got an A-B rhyme scheme with pure rhyme. So we got plots and knots all in wall being rhymed. The broken sheds looked sad and strange. Unlifted was the clinking latch. Weeded and worn the ancient thatch upon the lonely moated grange. So now we've got another second quatrain put in there, and we've got an A-B-B-A rhyme scheme to it. So it's got strange and grange are A and the first and last lines, and in the middle, latch and thatch. So we've got, and the when you count the syllables here, with blackest moss the flower plots, that's 4 beats, were thickly crusted, one and all. The rusted nails fell from the knots that held the pier to the gable wall. So it's got, we're looking at like 4 beats per line. 8 syllables generally, 4 beats. 1 beat being 2 syllables. And then we get to the end of it, and we've got, she only said, my life is dreary, he cometh not, she said. It's a shift from like a 4-4 to a 4-3. You can look at poetry as having a time signature a lot like music does. So in these pairs of lines, in the first quatrains, it was a 4-4 signature, you could say. So it's like this line is going to be 4, and this next line is going to be 4. So it's pairs of 4s, and everything in the quatrain follows that. And then we get to like the last quatrain, and it's different. It's a 4-3, 4-3. She only said, my life is dreary, he cometh not, she said. She said, I am aweary, I would that I were dead. So we have pauses in there in the second lines to make up for the words that are not there. And this structure goes through the whole poem. Her tears fell with the dews at even. Her tears fell ere the dews were dried. She could not look at the sweet heaven either at morn or eventide. So that's your A-B. After the flitting of the bats, when thickest dark did trance the sky, she drew her curtain casement by and glanced athwart the glooming flats. So again, we have our A-B-B-A. She only said, the night is dreary, he cometh not, she said. She said, I am aweary, I would that I were dead. Again, we have the shift in the rhythm. All right? So rhyme and rhythm are really, like, that's the essence of poetry that sounds beautiful. The idea of using rhyme and using rhythm. Now, in the poetry that you're going to be writing, I'm not going to want you to, your final product to be like a structured poem. I mean, you can if that's what you want to do, but I'm not going to be looking for that. But what I am going to look for is, can you show me that you can work it in whenever you can? Because that's what I think a good modern poet does, is that, and I'm talking about modern poets in terms of 20th century modern era. I'm not looking at postmodern poetry because quite honestly, I'm not a fan of postmodern poetry. I think that the modern poets were great poets because they understood the balance between making your ideas meaningful and making them sound beautiful. So, and I haven't even touched on like the other devices, like the alliteration, the consonants, the assonance, dissonance. Those are other things that you're going to be able to use in this lesson to make your poetry sound beautiful. All right? So this is half the battle. The first half of the battle is expressing ideas in a beautiful way. The next half is the trickier part because there's no rhyme scheme or pattern that you can use to come up with a profound idea.